married to an alien royal, technically for the math. I honestly didn't know whether to laugh or check my oxygen levels for hallucinogens. The walls of the recovery suite were doing that thing again, pulsing with a soft, rhythmic bioluminescence that was supposed to be soothing, but felt a lot like being digested by a very posh mood ring. I sat on the edge of the hovering medical slab, dangling my legs. The floor was warm, a stark contrast to the absolute zero reception I'd gotten when my salvage rig, the rusty spoon, had decided to disintegrate in the upper atmosphere. I shouldn't be here. By all accounts, I should be space dust. But the solstice ascendancy liked their probability curve smooth, and apparently my death would have caused a statistical hiccup in their precious synod. So here I was, the chaos factor, the variable they couldn't round down. The door slid open with a whisper of displaced air. Ilara stood there. I'd only seen her once before, through the haze of concussion protocols, but she was hard to forget. She was tall, her skin a shimmering landscape of iridescent, crystalline scales that caught the ambient light and fractured it into rainbows. She looked rigid, terrified, and breathtakingly regal. The room reacted to her instantly. The soft, curved walls sharpened their angles, the light shifting from a warm amber to a cool, sterile violet. It was fascinating, really. The architecture wasn't just housing, it was a mood ring on a citywide scale, externalizing the internal panic of its occupants. And right now, the environment was screaming that the crown princess was about to snap. "Hey," I said, my voice sounding too loud, was too scratchy in the acoustic perfection of the room. I held up the heated nutrient pouch the medical drones had dispensed. "I think this is supposed to be soup, or maybe engine coolant. Honestly, the flavor profile is confusing." Ilara didn't move. Her large, dark eyes, no whites, just endless pools of galaxy black, locked onto me. She held a data pad as if it were a shield. "Jackson Cole," she said. Her voice was like wind chiming through ice caves. "Beautiful. Brittle. The Synod has completed the integration analysis. The probability of social stabilization requires a biological union." I blinked. A biological union, right? "So we're doing this?" I asked, sliding off the bed. My boots hit the floor with a heavy thud that seemed to offend the silence. The laws of physics were suggestions. The laws of the Synod were threats. And I had a feeling defying this particular threat would involve an airlock. Ilara took a step back, her posture tightening. The crystalline ridges along her neck flared slightly. A defensive reflex? A threat display? "You are casual," she observed, the word tasting strange in her mouth. "You are an anomaly, a statistical error." "I'm just Jackson," I said, softening my tone. I could see the tremor in her hands. Terran empathy, that annoying little instinct that kept me from being a successful pirate, kicked in hard. She wasn't a tyrannical overlord. She was a kid who had just been told she had to marry the monster from the Outer Rim to save her spreadsheet. I took a step forward, not aggressive, just slow. She looked cold. Do high-functioning crystalline entities get cold? Look, I rubbed the back of my neck. I get it. This is weird. When you've got your calculations, and I've got a salvage ship that is currently a debris field, but you look like you're holding your breath. She stared at me, her head tilting in a jerky avian movement. The Synod predicts a 94% chance of cultural incompatibility. You are chaotic. You vibrate. I laughed softly. That might just be the caffeine withdrawal. I reached out, purely by instinct, to offer her the nutrient pouch. It was the only source of heat in the room. "Here, it's warm. You look frozen." It was a small gesture, a human gesture, a space mom gesture. But to Ilara, it seemed I had just offered her a supernova. She stared at the pouch, then at my hand. Slowly, hesitantly, she reached out. Her fingers were long, tipped with glass-like claws, and when they brushed against my skin, the sensation was electric. Not a shock, but a sudden, intense synchronization. Her skin instantly flushed from violet to a soft, chaotic swirl of rose and gold. The room around us groaned, the walls softening their edges as the ambient temperature spiked. "What is this?" she whispered, clutching the warm pouch with both hands, pulling it against her chest. Her dual hearts were beating so hard I could see the vibration against her ribs. "It's just heat, Alara," I said gently. "It's chilly in here." "No," she breathed, looking up at me, the terrifying void of her eyes suddenly looking less like a trap and more like a plea. "This is not just heat. The Synod does not account for texture. It does not quantify care." She looked at me as if I were a magic trick she couldn't figure out. The adaptation was happening in real time. Her biology was craving the warmth, the jagged, an unplanned, messy nature of a human being just trying to be nice. "Rigidity is just what happens right before you break," I told her, leaning back against the medical bed. "And you guys are way too stiff. If we're going to do this, we're going to need to relax." The walls pulsed again, confused. The Synod's algorithms were frantically recalculating, trying to understand why the introduction of a chaotic element was causing the room's stress levels to plummet. They didn't have a variable for a shared cup of bad soup. Ilara took a sip, grimaced, and then looked at me. The corner of her mouth twitched. A smile or gas? "It tastes like engine coolant," she agreed softly. I grinned. "See? We're bonding already." The calm lasted exactly 4 minutes and 12 seconds. When that was the time it took for the Synod to realize that the stabilizing biological union was actually generating an unauthorized amount of dopamine. The room, which had been softening into a pleasant, confused beige, suddenly snapped back into a grid of aggressive, blinding white. The soup pouch was slapped out of Ilara's hand by a sudden gust of pressurized air. "Anomaly detected," a voice droned, vibrating through the floorboards rather than coming from a speaker. "Emotional resonance exceeds safety parameters. Probability drift imminent. Purge initiated." Ilara stiffened, her scales rasping against each other like sandpaper. The light in her eyes dulled, retreating behind a film of panic. She stepped away from me, her training overriding the moment we just shared. "Jackson," she said, her voice dropping to a flat, terrified monotone. You must go. The archive, it is rejecting the data. You are creating noise." I looked at the walls. They were physically encroaching, the ceiling lowering by inches, the door widening like a hungry mouth. This wasn't just a smart home glitching out. It was the entire civilization's fear of change manifesting as interior design. The architecture was trying to squeeze me out like a splinter. I didn't run. I didn't fight. I just stood there, annoyingly solid. "No," I said. Ilara blinked, her head jerking in that bird-like way again. "The calculation is complete. You are a danger to the stasis. Leave." I walked over to where she stood, ignoring the way the floor tiles rippled to trip me. I closed the distance and did the unthinkable. I took her hand again. It wasn't a romantic sweep. It was an anchor. "You're shaking, Ilara," I said, keeping my voice low, below the hum of the ventilation. "Your Synod talks about stability, but look at you. You're about to shatter." The contact sent a shockwave through the room. The blinding white lights flickered, dipping into a stormy, chaotic purple. Her skin, cool, hard, geometric, suddenly warmed under my palm. "The archive. It screams," she whispered, squeezing my hand back so hard I thought a knuckle might pop. "It fears the error." "I'm not an error," I told her. "I'm the update." The ceiling stopped descending. The room seemed to hold its breath. The Synod was throwing every logic gate it had at the problem, trying to quantify why the Crown Princess's cortisol levels were dropping despite the presence of a chaotic intruder. It was the human paradox. We make no sense, and yet we make everything better. Veda, the matriarch, he didn't need to walk in for me to know she was watching. The air pressure shifted, heavy and judging. "Let go of him," the room commanded. Ilara looked at the door, then at our joined hands. She looked at the chaotic swirl of colors on her own skin. evidence of a heart rate she had been taught to suppress. She didn't let go. Instead, she stepped closer to me, invading my personal space in a way that felt entirely necessary. "He is warm," she announced to the empty air. It wasn't a defiance of the law. It was a statement of biological fact. The Synod roared, a sound of digital frustration. And then, with a heavy mechanical sigh, the lights dimmed. The aggressive white faded, replaced not by the cold violet of before, but by a soft, uncertain sunrise orange. The walls retreated. The architecture accepted the new geometry. Ilara looked up at me, and the iridescent scales on her face smoothing down, settling into a pattern I hadn't seen before. It wasn't rigid, it was fluid. "You are stubborn, Jackson Cole," she said, and for the first time there was no fear in the tilt of her head. I squeezed her hand. "It's part of the charm." The door slid shut, sealing us in. Not as prisoners, but as a variable the universe was just going to have to learn to live with. The math was still wrong, but for the first time in 1,000 years, the silence felt right.